What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be making a tier list of all of the weapons and items currently in Fortnite Chapter 5 Season 4. As always, if you guys do enjoy this video, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you like some more, comment down below where you would rank these items, and the gameplay in the background of this video is just going to be random Chapter 5 Season 4 gameplay, so that you have something to look at other than just the tier list, but the tier list will pop up as I rank an item. The first item we're going to be talking about is going to be the War Machine's Arsenal. This is something that I really don't have that much experience using. I don't use it at all, really. But I would probably put it at like C tier. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised by that because this item is considered to be really overpowered and annoying. But with the nerfs that have happened to it throughout the course of the season, where it takes longer to reload now, in addition to just me getting better with the jetpack and getting better at using shield bubbles, I feel like this item isn't that big of a threat anymore, and it's one of the things that I'm kind of happy if my opponent uses. There will be more items like that later on in the video. The next is going to be the War Machine's auto turret. I think, again, this is something that people would have very high rated. I'm going to put it at like B tier, I guess. I feel like the value you get out of this really isn't that big of a deal. Like, the damage it does over time isn't the greatest. A lot of times when I'm fighting somebody who's using this, I feel like I'm taking way more damage than I actually am. Like, I'll finish that fight and then be like, wow, I'm actually way healthier than I thought. I thought I was getting fried. So I really don't think this item is that good. It doesn't hurt you, in the sense where like you have it in your inventory and then it just kind of always does its thing, and it can be pretty helpful for locating players or like preventing yourself from getting caught off guard. The reason why I wouldn't rate it that highly though, or why I don't ever want to use it, is like I personally just don't feel the value it provides is worth an inventory slot. So that's kind of how I feel about that. The next item is going to be the combat AR. I'm going to put this at A tier. Spoiler, I think all of the ARs are A tier this season, and it really just comes down to personal preference. The combat AR is fine. Really good fire rate, kind of mid-ish damage, but low recoil and a good fire rate kind of makes up for it. Again, I think all the ARs are good, and it really just comes down to preference. Dr. Doom's Siphon Medallion, I'm going to put it S tier. I love Siphon. It was one of my favorite updates they ever had in Fortnite. Taking it away was, really sad to me. And this is probably my favorite medallion in the game. I also am someone who doesn't really care about the downside of using medallions in terms of like them giving your location away. So just being able to get 50 health or shield upon elimination is great in my opinion. So we'll put Dr. Doom's Siphon Medallion at S tier. The next is going to be Dr. Doom's Gauntlets. This is another item that I really don't know how to rank because I don't use it. I'm going to put it at B tier, I guess. A lot of people would probably have this at S tier. Again, like I talked about with War Machine's Arsenal, at the start of the season, I thought this item was a way bigger deal than how I feel about it currently. Combining, the jetpack and shield bubbles, I very rarely have a hard time playing against this. And if I'm going into a fight with somebody using this, I feel like I have a distinct advantage. Somebody who's using guns, I feel like, is typically more of a threat than somebody using these superpowers if you do know how to play against them and if you're used to playing against them. So I would rather fight someone who's trying really hard to use those than someone who's like, just really good at aiming with like one of the ARs or a shotgun. The next is going to be Emma Frost Scan Medallion. I'm also going to put this at S tier. I feel like the Dr. Doom and the Emma Frost Medallion are the two best. Emma Frost Medallion is, a bit more inconvenient to get with the Raft being a really chaotic, tight quarters POI. But having a scan every 50 seconds is great. The downside of medallions giving away your location, I just care less about. I feel like every season of Chapter 5 as we go on. So I like having the Scan Medallion, and most matches I want to get those two medallions. The next item is going to be the Hyper SMG. I'm going to put this at C tier, I guess. It could be D tier as well. I don't ever want to use this weapon. Like, this SMG, when it's been in the game in Chapter 5, and the Harbinger SMG that we had in some previous seasons as well in Chapter 5, just do not feel good to me. Like, of all the SMGs we've ever had in Fortnite, for some reason those two just feel so pitiful to use. So I don't really ever want to use this weapon. I feel like the only time I would really use it is off spawn, or maybe if I was going to use a hammer pump. But even then, there's other spray weapons I'd rather have. So we're just going to put that at C tier. It's not a horrendous item, but for me, it feels like there's no reason to ever use it. Especially with the meta this season, I pretty much always want to carry just 2 guns. The next item is going to be War Machine's Hover Jets. I'm going to put this at S tier. That's a surprise to nobody. If you've played a good amount in Chapter 5 Season 4, I'm sure you're well aware that the jetpack is like incredibly impactful on the game, and just being able to use the dashes for movement, but also the way you can use the jetpack in fights and to push opponents is a big deal. And I feel like if you have a jetpack and the opponent doesn't, you have an extreme advantage. And then the flip side of that as well, like if the enemy has a jetpack and you don't, like that is a rough fight. And a lot of the more annoying things, or the things that people struggle with most to play against, like the War Machine's Arsenal, the Doctor Doom gauntlets, the Captain America shield, just using the jetpack well negates the effectiveness, or like drastically reduces the effectiveness of a lot of those items. The next weapon is going to be the Monarch pistol. I'm going to put this at A tier, assuming it works how it's supposed to. Like Fortnite has been ruining this weapon week by week. The way the Monarch pistol is supposed to work is it shoots faster if you hip fire, and then when you aim in, you have a slower fire rate but increased damage. And over the course of like the past 2 weeks, at one point they made it to where it always has the aimed in damage and fire rate. So when you hip fire, you don't get that faster fire rate. It still hits hard. And then at one point they also made it to where aiming in no longer gave you bonus damage, and that was rough as well. I think now it's back to working as it's supposed to, but who knows if like a few days after this video, if they just change it again. But in theory, I think the Monarch pistol is incredibly good, and what people who have good aim are going to be a problem with this weapon. I personally don't really like using it because I would rather just use 2 guns and have bubbles to counter a lot of the things in the season. But I think the Monarch pistol is incredibly good. One potential downside of it that I do see is that like a lot of times when people have it, I feel like they try to use it too much, myself included, when I've tried to use it for videos. And just using an AR and getting guaranteed damage, I feel like a lot of times is better than kind of like the all or nothing nature of the Monarch pistol. But I do think it's very good, especially in the right hands. The next item is going to be Mysterio's medallion. We're going to put this at D tier. I think it's terrible. I talked before about how like the medallions giving away your location on the map isn't the biggest deal to me. Like that's not a huge downside in my opinion, but this medallion does not warrant that downside at all. I would rather, like, even if there was no reveal, I would rather just not have it than have it at all. The fact that you go invisible when you crouch and then need an animation to exit crouch is just so grief, in my opinion, especially because I'm someone who crouches a good amount. And I don't even really think it's that hard to see the invisible players, and it making an audio, like, reveal cue when someone's using it in your area. I feel like this item is like actively detrimental, and if I see somebody going for it, I genuinely assume they're less of a threat than if they didn't have it at all. Like I feel like most of the people trying to use this medallion are just not very good players that like kind of overrate that invisibility. But like I haven't seen a single person that I think is like good like using this medallion. The next is going to be the Gatekeeper shotgun. I'm going to put this at A tier. It's a good shotgun. They haven't nerfed it. I think the way fights play out this season with like the jetpack has reduced the effectiveness of the Gatekeeper, in my opinion. Like I'd rather use the Sovereign shotgun because I feel like it combos better with the jetpack. But the Gatekeeper is still an incredible shotgun, and in certain fights, it is just, you know, best ever. Like if you're going to just get on somebody, the Gatekeeper is the best. But with the jetpack, I feel like not only do fights get a little weird sometimes where you and the opponent are both jetpacking, but if you try to like jump on somebody with the Gatekeeper, they have the ability to just like jetpack dash and then be a decent way away from the Gatekeeper. It doesn't have the greatest range. It doesn't have bad range, but it doesn't have the greatest range. And having somebody jetpack away and kind of grief damage on one of your shots can be a really big deal because this gun only has 3 or 5 shots, depending if you have drum mag. And like the way jetpack fights play out, I feel like my accuracy isn't as good with shotguns, and so wasting a shot or 2 with the Gatekeeper really matters, and with the Sovereign it doesn't as much, and that's why I've been preferring the Sovereign. The next item is going to be the machine pistols. I'm going to put this at B tier, I guess. It's not an item that I ever want to use, really. I think a lot of people really like this item and would probably put it in S tier, but the reason why I don't like this is, one, I only want to use 2 guns this season, so this isn't going to be one of them. It's not going to replace my shotgun, and it's not going to replace my AR, right? But also, I've seen people talk about, like, I use this instead of a shotgun, and that can work. But the thing about it is I feel like if you're using machine pistols, it's always going to be a messy fight. Like, one of the reasons why shotguns have been so prevalent or like so dominant in close range fights in Fortnite is not only just because, you know, good damage up close, but the way you can play off a shotgun where you like peek for a second, shoot, go back into cover, or like, you know, do something with your movement in between shots, especially when playing off any sort of cover or bubbles this season. Like, shotguns allow you to expose yourself for a very limited amount of time, but get a lot of damage in that time. And so you end up taking less if you play cover well, right? With the machine pistols, the entire time you're dealing damage, you have to be exposed, and you have to deal damage for a while because it's more of like a damage over time weapon rather than just like a lot of damage in like a snap instant. So like the way fights play out, if you're using the machine pistols instead of a shotgun, I feel like is very messy. Like, you're more likely to take damage in those fights, and so I feel like you're more likely to like lose to third parties or just lose the fights outright. If the hammer pump was meta, I think the machine pistols would be very good to carry because I do rate them higher than the hyper SMG. But just with how the game currently plays out, even if the sovereign shotgun was vaulted tomorrow, I would be using the gatekeeper. Like, the hammer pump is fine, but I just don't think it's that good. So like the machine pistols don't really have a place in my inventory despite them being like a solid weapon, and that's why I put them like B tier. The next is going to be the sovereign shotgun. I'm going to put this at A tier. I kind of already talked about this a bunch when I talked about the gatekeeper, but like, it's a good shotgun, and the way fights play out this season, I value that added range, and I value that 6 rounds, you know, 1 shell reload at a time. And I've had people ask me like, well, the combat was like that last season. It had more range than the gatekeeper. Why didn't you like it? And it's mainly just because of the way the mobility played out. I feel like with nitro gloves, you would go on to somebody and then shotgun them. With the jetpack, like, it's pretty much in constant use in a lot of fights, and people can use it more in fights because of the fuel. So I feel like every close range fight, or not every close range fight, but most close range fights I have versus a decent opponent involve jetpacking, and I feel like the sovereign shotgun is just more in line for that playstyle. The fact that it has like the accuracy bonus when aiming in is nice, but I feel like I only take advantage of that in select scenarios. But it's a solid shotgun for sure. And I just feel that it pairs better with the jetpack, and then that makes it, you know, just pair better for like the current meta. The next item is going to be the striker AR. This is my personal favorite AR. We're going to put this in A tier as well, like the combat. For me, it would probably be S tier, but for overall, I think it's A tier. If you're a controller player, this is probably the best AR for you to use because it's the only one with good aim assists. Both the combat AR and the striker burst AR have limited aim assist, and the striker AR itself, it's not like it's a bad gun. It kills quick, it fries people. I think the recoil on it is very manageable. So personally, my favorite AR this season is the striker AR, and I think it's very good. Y'all probably heard me talk about it in several videos. The next item is going to be the Captain America shield. My opinion on this would be D tier. Like, there's nothing I would want my opponent to do in a fight at this point in time more than use the Captain America shield, especially if I have a decent striker AR with a red dot on it. I'm going to beam that player. And if they try to block, I'm going to beam them and break their block. I'm going to put it at C tier, I guess. I know a lot of people still rate this item very highly, but I feel like the accuracy nerfs, the damage nerf to it, and just me getting better at playing with the jetpack and playing off shield bubbles, I do not think of the Captain America shield as a threat in the same way that I did at the start of the season. And like I already said, you know how you feel about an item when it's like, how do you feel when an enemy uses this? If I see someone over-relying on the Captain America shield, I genuinely think they're a free kill. So to me, it's not a very threatening item. Some people would probably have it at S tier. I'm just going to put it at C tier, I guess. I don't really ever want to use it, and I don't mind playing against it at all. As of how it's currently balanced, who knows how thing will be in the future. Striker Burst AR, we're going to put A tier. I think it's a fine AR. The main thing that holds it back for me is just the fact that I'm a controller player, and it has very limited aim assist. Also, the burst nature, I like burst guns, but I feel like with this season, especially when playing against shield players, if I'm going to spray out a shield's block, I would so much rather have the striker AR, you know? The full auto one. So I think the burst is good. If I was a keyboard player, I would probably put it at S tier, but we'll put it at A tier. I think all of the ARs are decently balanced this season. That's why I put them all at A tier. No matter which is your favorite, if you like the combat AR, if you like the striker AR, if you like the striker burst, they're all very viable in my opinion, and it really just comes down to preference. I don't think there's a definitively right or wrong choice. It really just comes down to which one you enjoy using. So I think all the ARs are very good. It's just preference. Shield bubbles, I'm going to put this at S tier. This is probably an overrating. I think they're very good this season. Kind of talked about it when we talked about the items, but putting a bubble down forces somebody using the War Machine's arsenal, the Doom gauntlets, or the shield to play their fight differently. All of those items, people just kind of want to jetpack up and then throw or shoot it down at you. And using the bubble makes them play in a different way. Whenever I've talked about this, people are like, yeah, but the enemy just jumps in my bubble and kills me. Like, you get a different fight versus them when you have shield bubbles versus when you don't have shield bubbles. It's not like you throw the bubble down and then they don't exist anymore and you won the fight. Like, you still have to play the fight and win the fight, but forcing people using those items to play in a different way, I think is heavily in your favor. Also, with the movement of the War Machine hover jets, the jetpack, I feel like the opponent has more say in your movement. Like when we had shockwaves or the nitro gauntlets last season, you could use those to just run away from a fight. Or if you were pushing somebody with those, it was harder for them to get damage on you. But with the jetpack, it's a more like gradual movement item, you know? So I feel like the enemy has more potential to beam you if you're trying to escape or if you're trying to push them. And so having shield bubbles to kind of compensate for some of that awkward timing, I think is really beneficial for me. That's honestly what I've missed most about them when I've used different items for videos. Like when I've used the Monarch pistol to get gameplay for videos, sure, I miss the bubbles versus some of the Marvel items, but like the thing I missed most was just like when I go to push somebody with the jetpack, if they shoot back, like it's just rough. So like I think shield bubbles just really, really, really compensate for a lot of like weird timing you can get this season with the jetpack. And then also like, I feel like other people using the jetpack as well, like just, I don't know, timing feels a lot different this season. So just having, you know, an immediate, I put this down and then now we can, you know, have some sort of structure to the fight. I personally really like, and that's why I always use them this season, despite not really using them that much in the past. It's a combination of the Marvel items existing and the way the jetpack makes the game play. The next item is going to be the hammer pump. I'm going to put this at B tier. A lot of people would probably put it at D tier, but I don't think it's bad. I just think that like throughout chapter 5, the spammy shotguns we've gotten, like the Frenzy Auto, the Gatekeeper, the Combat last season, the Sovereign this season, they've all just been so good. But I feel like as far as like a pump goes, like the hammer pump is fine. It's just overshined by those other items. And those other items are also much easier to use and free up inventory slots. So like, I feel like that's why people don't care to use the hammer pump that much. But I think it's a fine item and it's been solid all of chapter 5. Another item that's been solid all of chapter 5 is going to be the Ranger pistol. I'm going to put this at B tier. It's just, you know, fine all chapter. It's got good hip fire. It's got good damage. It's got a solid fire rate, very minimal recoil, very minimal bloom. The only reason it's not really used that much is because I would rather use other items. But if I get the Ranger pistol off spawn and have to use it, I'm not like annoyed by that. You know, it's a fine item. It's not the best. It's not the worst. Shockwaves, I'm going to put these at A tier, I guess. A lot of people like to use them instead of bubbles. Like they'll run double mobility, or some people don't want to use the jetpack. I would highly advise just getting used to the jetpack. This happens every season when we have a new item and people just don't want to use it. But I think it's very clear the jetpack is integral to like how the game plays right now. The shockwaves are still a fine mobility item, so I'll put them at A tier. And yeah, I feel like if you guys have played Fortnite for a while, you know how shockwaves are. And then bunkers, I'm gonna put at A tier, I guess. The reason why I like bubbles more than bunkers this season, despite preferring bunkers in the past, is everything I just talked about. When you're dealing with a Captain America shield, a War Machine arsenal, or the Doom gauntlets, those people are going to typically jetpack up and then shoot it down at you or throw it down at you. And the bunker doesn't really protect against that much because they'll be above you in that instance. Also, when I was talking about dealing with some of the awkward timing this season, bubbles help a lot because you just throw the bubble down and you're good as long as you're not in water. But bunkers, sometimes you throw it and you end up underneath it or it places in a different way. Like bunkers are great, don't get me wrong, but for the type of fights I'm using my cover item in this season, bubbles just work much better for me. But in like zero build competitive, bunkers are probably still going to be like essential for endgame because it is a more like long lasting cover item. But that is going to be it for this video. I hope you guys found this to be helpful, informative, interesting. I don't rank the heals because for the most part, I think they're all really good and it just depends how much you find. If I have the choice of one big or a fizz, I'm probably going to take the fizz. If I have a choice between 6 splashes or one big, probably going to take the big. Or the splashes, sorry. If I have 3 bigs and 2 splashes, I'm probably going to take the bigs. I don't really care that much about heals. I just take whichever one fits best based on how many I have at that moment in time, you know? But if you guys did find this to be helpful, informative, interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you would like to see more, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.